We are going to get started. Again, everyone, welcome to Marigold Live, Building Global Cannabis Brands. Thank you so much for joining us, taking some time out of your day. We have a really great schedule lined up, which I will walk you through, and some incredible speakers. A little bit about me and Marigold PR. I am Brooke Russell, account lead. I've been with Marigold for just over 4 years, and Marigold itself has been in the cannabis space since 2016. Our expertise is B2B marketing and communications, and we've delivered profile building results for over 120 North American businesses and worked on many international campaigns. More and more, we're seeing cannabis companies with global ambitions invest in strategic communications and public relations tactics like press releases, media relations, and events to build brand visibility and earn stakeholder trust, which in turn makes them better equipped to compete and lead on the global stage. This is especially important because we've entered a new era of search. Muckrack recently did a study that analyzed over 1 million AI-generated citations to really understand what type of sources generative AI references most. Great news for PR. This study shows that 89% of all cited sources are earned media. So that means, your news coverage, feature stories, product reviews, expert quotes. So when people ask AI tools for insights or brand comparisons, the results they see are heavily influenced by third-party coverage like journalistic content. But to wrap up, global expansion isn't a copy-paste of domestic strategy. It's super important to build a brand and reputation that makes it easier to expand into international markets, attract new customer segments, and find partnerships and revenue opportunities, all of which will be spoken about today. So without further ado, here's our schedule. First up, we're going to have a fireside chat with ICBC, the International Cannabis Business Conference. We'll be joined by Alex Rogers, founder and CEO, and Alex Revich, advisor, who will discuss the upcoming ICBC Berlin in April 2026. And then next, we'll have our first panel, Building Brand Reputation with Global Media and Events, which will be moderated by David Brown of StratCann and includes Michael Hoban of Prohibition Partners, Jay Rosenthal of Cultivated Media, and Alex Revich of ICBC. We're going to end the afternoon with our second panel, Building a Sustainable Business Beyond Borders, moderated by our own Katie Pringle of Marigold PR, with speakers Sherry Boodram of CannDelta, Barry Laxer of Cielo Verde, and Deepak Anand of ASDA Consultancy Services. Both panels will have a 5-minute Q&A, so please throw in your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom for the moderator. But Alex and Alex, over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brooke. Really nice to be here with you all, and really excited to be doing this with Alex Rogers, someone who now we've known each other since when we met in 2016, which I wanted to kind of quickly start off by telling the quick story of how we met. I was helping start the Lift Expo. For those that remember Lift Expo, may have rested in peace. And was doing the Vancouver show back in 2016, and I ran into you at the after party. And I still remember commenting on your shell toes, which back then, not too many people had Adidas shell toes. Now my 13-year-old and every one of her friends wears them, but back then it was pretty rare. And I remember chatting with you briefly, and you told me your unbelievable story of how you were in Germany and why you wanted to do a show in Germany. Maybe just take a few moments and just kind of tell the people why you ended up doing a show in Germany to begin with.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, everybody. Great to be here. Yeah, there's nothing like good weed and fly kicks to bring people together, huh, Al?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, so the gist of it is I lived in Germany for a while. I lived all over Europe, like in my 20s and early 30s, and like I was slanging herb, you know what I mean? And I was living there just trying to just I was just chasing girls and trying to learn languages, you know what I mean? That's really all I cared about for years and years. And I always say my sister went to Princeton and I went to prison, right? So because I come from a nice family from Minneapolis, but I did go to prison for a while in Austria and Germany, mostly in Germany. And when I got out of prison, it definitely helped me a lot, put me on the right track. Actually, not that I liked it or it was fun, but in hindsight, it did help me. And so when I got out of prison, I went right and I was like 35 years old, and I got out and I finished my degree. And then I started the big medical cannabis clinic in Oregon. Then I started Oregon's biggest B2B event. And from that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to Germany and legalize this shit and fucking introduce B2B and just blow shit up. and be an anständiger Mensch, as they say in German, which just basically means an upstanding dude. And not that I was like doing anything morally reprehensible selling weed in fucking Germany, but I could have been doing something probably more productive with my time, I reckon. But in the end, here we all are.
Yeah, for sure. And I still remember that first show in 2017 in that small little hotel, which I had a chance to go back to this year, and I can't even believe that we fit into that tiny little place. How many people were there at that first event?
About like 750, which we thought was good because everyone, when we brought the show to Germany, everyone was like, the Germans like, oh, Alex, I'm very afraid for you, $500 a ticket, because no one had ever charged. There was always 20, $30 a ticket for a consumer show. So we didn't know. So that 750 was actually like, it was okay.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll never forget how lucky we were because the German tender came out literally a week before the show started. And it actually said they had to partner with a Canadian company, if you recall. And there were lineups. There was only a few booths we had there, and there were lineups of Germans
I
at these
recall,
Canadian shows.
homie.
Remember that?
I recall even a blind hog finds an ear of corn every once in a while, I'll tell you. You know what I'm saying? We got lucky.
Yeah, yeah, and then over the years, the German market has grown so tremendously. What do you attribute to why Germany has kind of been the leader, and all this interest that have kind of gathered to the one that we had this past year, which was huge, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Yeah, I mean, so I always predicted that Germany would be the leader for various different reasons. Sometimes I feel like I willed it into existence because I wanted it so much and worked so hard for it. But I just figured when they did it, they would codify it into law in some way that is properly regulated. Now, that can be all argued now with medical cannabis in Germany being kind of like it was in Canada or America, and kind of a little bit wild, wild west. So the analogy is that medical cannabis in America wasn't really that regulated, but the irony is that then adult use was more regulated than medical. And I wasn't sure. Out of all things I predicted in Europe, I wasn't sure that was going to be the case. I didn't predict that actually, but that's what's happening, and there's a lot of things around that. But right now, Germany took cannabis off the narcotics list. I've been an activist for 30 years. Jack Hare was my mentor. Santa Cruz, 1993. Let's go. Let's hit the streets. Let's rock this. And so it can't be understated that Germany took cannabis off the narcotics list. And by doing, they already had a fairly robust medical cannabis program. But by doing that, it created a de facto adult use system in Germany because the European overlords, the EU, won't allow for adult use unless it's under some like really strict auspices, medical and research auspices. So now, because cannabis is off the narcotics list and the system was already primed until then, that the gist of it is, and the reality on the matter is, Germany's the big market, the big legal market in Europe right now, doing over $1 billion a year. Maybe they do 2 billion for next year. The trajectory is pretty vertical right now.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's last year we had our biggest ICBC yet, which still people are still buzzing from. I think it was over quadruple the amount of people from our first one. Maybe kind of talk about, how big was ICBC this year, and what was some of the feedback that you got?
33,500 people. We actually expect 5,500 for next event. People love the ICBC because what's so cool is there's people from 80 different countries there. So it's in Germany, it's in Berlin, but I reckon, what do we say? About 27% is what are from Germany, right? Then about 35 or so percent are from Greater Europe. And then the rest are from a lot of American and Canadian, Americans, Yankees and Canucks. And then you've got South America, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. I mean, that's what's up. The German market's running things, but the ICBC's become a meeting point for the Eastern Hemisphere for all these up and coming markets. And that's what makes it really just cool and dynamic and not a shit show. And just like everyone you meet, it's just super dynamic and interesting and diverse.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I was always very proud to say we brought a lot of Canadians from that first year, and chances are, if you meet a Canadian there, chances are I brought them, or maybe Deepak brought them. But it's a very kind of small, tight-knit group, and really proud to see how much it's grown. Especially this year, we had so many Canadians there. Everywhere I went, we saw Canadians. Maybe talk about some of the exciting things we got going on for 2026. Already people are starting to ask me about it. I know a few people already booked their booths for next year. What are some of the exciting things kind of going on for 2026 and both from a Germany perspective and from an ICBC perspective?
Yeah, well, it can't be understated. Just talking about Canada, it can't be understated how important the German market is for Canada because I reckon, well, I think 70% of the market in Canada is import from Germany, right? Or excuse me, from 70% of the German market is imports from Canada,
Right.
right? So this is a really strong connection that kind of started when we did the first event in 2017, kind of fell off a little bit because it wasn't necessary for the tenders and and the people got the tenders and then they opened up. Now there is no more tender, but now it's more important that the Canadians are up in the mix right now because it really helped boost the Canadian market. So the Canadian Canada Germany connection is strong, it's real, and it's booming, and it's not going anywhere. It's going up in an upwards direction, big time. And so that's what we're doing next year. I mean, look, we give away tickets to one group of people right now. That's the German pharmacies, and that's a big success for us. So all the buyers are there for medical cannabis specifically. So that's something we started this year. We had about 150 pharmacies. That was cool. It was a big hit. And so we're doubling down those efforts, hope to get 300 to 400 German medical cannabis pharmacies this year. And the other thing we're doing is we're creating all these network spaces. We're making it a little bit more interactive, food courts, full service bars, ambient, DJs, atriums. We've got some famous people coming out. I haven't confirmed. I'm basically got a few close to confirmations going on, so we'll be able to announce that. Some really cool, just heads in the game that have been doing it for a while, and just make it a real thing.
Yeah,
Make it fun, exciting, dynamic, and everybody knows the place to do business in Europe is the ICBC.
yeah.
That's where it goes down.
No, for sure. And just last thing, I know we got to wrap up. You're doing some other awesome stuff. You got the Tallman event coming up at the Tallman House, really, really cool, and November 10th in London. And you have the ICBC MJ Biz collab, the global exchange. Maybe just take a few seconds just to mention what that's all about before we wrap up.
Yeah, if any of you Canadians are ready to take the nesty plunge and come to America in these tumultuous times, then we are having a global exchange, ICBC, right up in the mix on the floor of ICBC in the cultivation area. And what we're basically doing is we're connecting the big MSOs and executives from North America to the European and international executives. And we're giving a crash course in Vegas on our stage that is going to just straight up break down what's happening internationally and where's the meat on the bone, where's the real esoteric shit that people need to know so they can see if they have a viable play or not.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. If anyone wants to reach out and learn more about ICBC in Berlin next year, MJ Biz ICBC collab, or the Tallman House events, feel free to reach out to me, Alex Revich, easily found on LinkedIn, or Alex Rogers, but he might be a little slower to respond on LinkedIn than I am. So either way, reach
I'm
out and we'll get you
accessible.
info.
I'm accessible. I'm busy as shit, but accessible. Yo, big up, Al. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Before you guys hop off, I actually do just want to ask Alex a quick question. Elise in the chat was wondering what country you think is actually doing weed the right way. If you want to answer that quickly.
What country has is doing weed the right way? Oregon.
Not
No,
Slovenia, Alex. I thought you would say Slovenia.
Slavinajad, but basically it's Germany. It's what I think. So I do think countries. So there are states that are doing it in the right way in America. If I say Canada, everyone that had any respect for me up to this point is going to eschew that immediately. So what I would say is I think Germany is, because honestly, who takes it off the narcotics list, right? And there now is this de facto legalization system. It's off the narcotics list. So I think that's the number one thing you can do, not only for the industry or for commerce, but from an activist and from a human rights perspective, that's the joint. So I honestly do believe Germany is, and the crazy thing about Germany is what's dope, what just like the cherry on top, the sundae, is that it's legal to smoke anywhere. You can smoke weed basically anywhere in Germany. Outside my 5-star hotel, I'm fucking bliffs, right? And I'm telling you, cats are just like, no one's saying nothing because they can't say nothing because you can basically smoke weed anywhere you can smoke a cigarette in Germany. And so that's super different from like America. Most states, you don't have this public consumption. You can't just be walking down the sidewalk smoking a spliff. So in Germany, and you can grow weed in your own crib, 4 people per person, not just per household in Germany. So they've got these, like, Germany is really just chunky. And the irony is people didn't think Germany had like the cannabis culture like Spain or France even, or Czech or whoever, right? But the fact is the Germans were just really coy about it because it's still so stigmatized. So there's basically all these sleeper cells that were just lying dormant that now that shit opened up, these cats are like boom, and that's why everything's blowing up in Germany now to the next level. And you see, oh, these cats do have cannabis culture. At least there are some real heads up in the mix. So I'm pretty much astounded that you not only have this basic adult use, de facto adult use system through medical, but you have this decrim law where you can have 25 grams on you at any time, and the popo can't say nothing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you, and for joining us. We'll throw a link to ICBC Berlin in the chat as well for more information. And we're going to head to our first panel, Building Brand Reputation with Global Media and Events. Over to David, our moderator.
Okay. Thank you, Brooke. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. So like Brooke said, we've got 3 panelists today. We've got about 30 minutes to chat, so I'm just going to jump into things pretty quickly, but we're going to be talking about building brand reputation with global media and events. And I want to start off just giving 1 minute for each of our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Alex, and then Jay, and then Michael Hoban. So Alex, go ahead and tell us why you're on the panel today.
Nice to do this with you, Dave. Known you for a long time, and really excited to be here to talk international. I've been talking international for a really long time, as I just mentioned, starting with ICBC in 2017. But really excited that a lot of people have really come on board and wanted to do this, not only because of the challenges here in Canada. Let's be honest, a lot of people were kind of slow to jump on board until they realized how difficult it was here, and then they came on board. But others saw this potential early on. The mistake some of them made, though, was that they actually didn't even focus on Canada anymore. But I've been in this industry since 2013, originally one of the first employees of MedRelief, and since then went on to be a co-founder of Flower out of beautiful Kelowna, BC. So I've been on this ride for a while, including with the Lift Expo and the Canadian Medical Cannabis Industry Association. If anyone remembers what C3 used to be, I was executive director there for a few months. So been on this ride for a long time. I still love it. I'm still smiling, a little more grayer, lost a little hair, but still love it. And here I am at my office at Lush. We're a contract manufacturer of edibles with many different products across different formats. So yeah, never a dull moment in my life. And when I'm not hustling hard in this cannabis industry, I'm raising 2 young kids, 13 and 9. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Alex. Jay, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Compared to you two, I'm like a newbie in the industry, but got it in 2016, 2017. I'm Jay Rosenthal, co-founder, managing director of Cultivated Media. You can find us at cultivated.news. Always be selling, which is your essential daily 5-minute newsletter talking about the business, policy, and culture of cannabis. Before that, I did a stint at Dutchie, and before that, I co-founded Business of Cannabis, which Mike Hoban ably took off my hands via acquisition. So in and around the industry for a long time. I don't have as much gray hair as Alex, even though I think I'm younger. And when I'm not doing this, I'm actually at music, and sometimes I see Alex. I'm always wearing a hat. That's how you know me. I'm happy to hand it over to my pal, Michael Hoban.
Buddy old pal. Thank you guys, and thank you for having me on. So I'm Mike. I am head of marketing and communications at Prohibition Partners. So we are a data, media, and events company. As Jay said, we do now own Business of Cannabis, which is a media site, but also we run events through. So we got Business of Cannabis New York, which is our flagship conference. That's November 6th, so next month. But yeah, we have a number of other brands under the umbrella now. So Prohibition Partners is mainly data and intelligence, Business of Cannabis media and events. Then we have Cannabis Health, which is also media, but we're moving that brand into events this year as well. So we have a healthcare professional education event in London in at the end of November this year. We also have Cannabis Europa, which is our flagship conference in London. That is going to be, I can't tell you when. It's going to be next year. The dates are coming out soon. And then we also have some psychedelics brands as well. So we have Psychedelic Health, and we have Psych Symposium, which is another event that we're hosting in December. So yeah, that's me. Pleased to be here, and really great panel.
Thank you, gentlemen. And I think I was so eager to jump into things that I forgot to introduce myself. I am David Brown. I am one of the creators of StratCann and one of the primary contributors to StratCann, which is a cannabis news and events publication and company for the Canadian industry. We've been around for, I think, 5 years now. I've been working in the cannabis industry and reporting on the evolution of the cannabis industry in Canada for about 12 years now. And I also took a bit of a detour and served as a senior policy advisor for Health Canada's cannabis legalization and regulation branch from 2018 to 2020, which gave me some interesting behind the curtain scene of understanding of the development of those regulations. So with that said, I want to get right into my questions though. Alex Revich, my first question for you. From your perspective as someone who has event experience, not just in Canada, but also in Europe, why are events so important for building a global cannabis brand? And sort of following up on that, what strategies can companies take before, during, and after a show to really ensure that they're maximizing their ROI?
Yeah, no, good question. And really, it has to do with networking. People who know me know I'm a networking machine. I love networking. I think it's so important, whether it's someone that you meet that is good for you, or maybe someone in your network, and then they do the same favor for you. So it's really important to kind of keep building that net wider. But also, not only about meeting new people, it's also about spending time with the people you know. So whether it's a client that you're trying to get as a client, or is it a client that you want to spend some time with so that you get to know them a little bit more and learn more about the opportunities and actually just get to know them as human beings? I think that is really important too, to get to know people outside of a business, and doing these types of events is a good way to do it. Now, also important to get to know your network, get them excited about your participation. So before you go, announce that you're participating there, what you're hoping to achieve, who you want to meet. A lot of times I end up having people reach out to me before I go to the event to say, hey, I'm going to see you there, or they'll write in the comments that they're going to be there, and I get to look them up and sometimes make a meeting with them. So that's something that is an important part of it. But also, one of the most important parts about doing these shows is in the follow-up. Not only following up on new people that you meet, but also following up with the people you spend some time with, and being able to announce that you participated on your social media, and maybe even point out some of the things you learned there. Your network really appreciates that and gets to know you as a subject matter expert. So those are just some of the thoughts around why it's so important to do these events. And again, I'm pretty biased. I pretty much go to any event where people will let me go, starting from 2013 when I was doing cancer events and pain conferences when I was in the early medical side of cannabis. Any place that would let me, I would go. And even if they didn't let me, I would fight them to let me in. So I'm a bit biased. I love these types of things.
So Michael, a bit of a follow-up on that question, but from your perspective, how can brands leverage event-driven marketing in order to establish themselves as industry thought leaders?
Oh, I just realized I was on mute. Thank you, David. The first thing for me that I would say is lead with education and insight. So as we all know, there is still a hell of a lot of misinformation floating around in the cannabis industry, especially in Europe. And I think credibility is really gained and elevated by cutting through the noise with education and insight. So event-driven marketing really gives brands a platform to share evidence-based insights, highlight responsible use, demystify the category, dispel any mistruths, whatever it may be. So by using events as essentially educational touch points, brands can move beyond selling and actually establish themselves as trusted voices in the industry. And it's not even just during or post event that you can actually start to lead and own that conversation. You can be doing it pre-event. you can take a look at the agenda, for example. You can take a look at the themes and topics that are going to be discussed, and you can create a content calendar for the run up to the event, that you can be publishing content in multiple different formats to not just contribute to the conversation, but actually to own and drive the conversation in advance of the event. So then at the event itself, what you're actually doing is just reinforcing and amplifying that sort of credibility that you have started to create, or yeah, at least started to create before the event, which I think leads nicely on to the fact that you need to create and shape the conversation and not just participate. The brands that will truly stand out at an event, they aren't just standard exhibitors or sponsors, they are conveners, shall we say. They host roundtables, they partner with experts, they're on panel discussions, they might be moderators as well. And all of these things will position a cannabis brand not as a follower of the conversation, but as a shaper of the conversation. And I think events give you that opportunity to lead the dialogue. Now, of course, some events are purely pay to play, some are partly pay to play. I am not saying that you're going to be able to do all these things without putting your hand in your pocket. But it's certainly a worthy investment. If you're truly going to commit to being an industry thought leader, you have to commit to events. And I think on that, just further on that, I would leverage storytelling and capitalize on authenticity. So event-driven marketing basically lets you put people and stories front and center. So you can showcase growers, patients, innovators, community advocates, whatever it is, that will add authenticity that an audience will, and different audiences will really connect with and resonate with. And I think it's those type of stories that can turn a cannabis brand into a thought leader rather than just another product on the shelf, another brand, another ancillary service. And I think, sorry, just quickly, I know I'm taking up a bit of time. The last thing I would say, and I'm sure my friend JR will agree, is content. On all of the points that I just mentioned, content is absolutely core. If you're going to take ownership of the conversation and position your brand as a thought leader, content is going to get you there. So whether it's videos, written articles, reports, podcasts, ideally a rich multimedia mix, content is the fastest and most effective way to achieve thought leader status. So, but one thing I will say is just quickly, just going back, think about content formats. So, and think about your audience. So for example, if you're in the B2B realm and your audience is predominantly senior executives, for example, creating a 30-minute video of, post-event insights might not be the best option. CEOs, C-suite, they are generally time poor. So you might be better creating an infographic or even a 3 to 5 minute video of key insights. So yeah, just to sort of, I know I've waffled a little bit to wrap all that up. I think what I would say is events are the stage where cannabis brands can shift from actually selling to storytelling, and from participating in the conversation to actually owning it. And
Michael, I want to actually dig into that a little bit before we jump over to Jay. You talked about some successful, unique campaigns in the lead up to, as well as at events, without necessarily naming brands. Can you give one or two examples quickly of some successful, unique approaches people have taken to their presence at these global events?
I don't think it's necessarily campaign driven. What I would say is actually it's more about that sort of always on stream of content before the event. So yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be campaign driven, if you like, but that constant stream of sort of relevant, always on content in the run up to the event, where you're, building this rhetoric and you're building your credibility and trying to own that conversation. I think that's what it's more about. But what I would say on that is, obviously, from a content perspective, focus on quality, don't focus on quantity. Like, it's better to have, 3 pieces of really high quality content a week than having, 1 piece of content every single day that's just not up to scratch.
So not a press release every day. Not a good idea,
And
right?
not a press release every day. Absolutely not, Alex. No. I hope that answered your question, David.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a great segue to my question for Jay. A bit of a shift, but Brooke talked earlier about search engines are changing. The way people produce content is changing with the shift from traditional search platforms like Google to more AI-driven tools like ChatGPT. From your perspective, how should brands going global think about optimizing their online presence? What are some things that they need to take into account today that maybe wasn't true even just 5 years ago?
Sure. First of all, can I just say that Mike Hoban, he gets me. He really.
I really get, and that is a great question, and that is, you are the best person to answer it. So I'm gonna sit back and I'm gonna listen.
I mean, certainly content consistency, cadence, and quality sort of is what I always preach for companies that are sort of trying to build their online presence, for sure. And I just want to be honest and frank. If you're trying to be a global cannabis brand right now, you might be solving the wrong problem, with all due respect, because the markets are so fragmented. There's barely national brands in the US, right? There are some in Canada, but only because of the unique way that we legalized. And like, I have a closet full of would-be global cannabis brands. I even have props. If you could tell me what this one was, I'll give someone $2. They grew with fish. Anyone?
Juicy Fields?
No. Green Relief.
Oh,
I know you all have a Belief hat, for sure. Believe. Like, we have that, right? This one is one of my favorites, and maybe I'll wear this one the whole time.
Yeah. East Coast.
Right. Right. There are global cannabis brands that were one event full that paid a lot of the bills, frankly, at Lyft. Like, who remembers the Upside Down House in Vancouver? So what I'm saying is, like, global cannabis brand is maybe an oxymoron for many things. And also think about global brands that you would aspire to be, like Levi's, Coca-Cola. They didn't start as wanting to be global brands. They started by dominating one market, one purpose. Coke was one, soda fountain drink in Atlanta before it was hitting shelves all over the world. And Levi's was, providing services to minors, right, in California. So for cannabis, the real play from my perspective is not about global SEO or AI search, although that's amazing. But what would someone even do if they found you in an AI search? Like, you can't necessarily bring a brand. You can't even look for a brand in your own community because, Google search is so broad, right? You can find a store in your neighborhood, which is a really important strategy, and many people sort of dive deep on that, and there's ways to optimize that. But owning your own story locally, so when AI tools do scrape the internet and they find consistency and credibility and authentic content, as Mike was talking about you and your company. And I'll even give some examples from cannabis, like Wana and Wild. I don't think aspired to be global brands when they launched. They were trying to find a market in their own local communities and fucking kick ass. And they did. And that led to the next and led to the next. And then it's about how do you replicate that across markets, which is really hard. But they've done it because they had a product that surprised and delighted their customers. And they just kept doing it. And it leads to brand expansion, it leads to all those things. But if you are starting a brand now and said, I'm going to go to ICBC, and then I'm going to go to, Cannabis Europa, and then I'm going to go, to MJ Biz, and we're going to dominate everything, you will fail. And I have a hat collection to show it, a t-shirt collection to show it, that it's not a great strategy to say we're going to go global, because then you do almost everything shitty, with all due respect to all the companies that we all worked for that did shitty and trying to be global. So that's my sense.
So maybe a way to kind of expand on that a little bit then, Jay, another question for you is, where do you think companies should draw the line between trying to host their own content versus partnering with media outlets to tell their brand story?
Yeah. I mean, I think I do everything I said before. I do think finding an audience is really important through content, because the channels that we all know didn't exist when Coke and Levi's started, for sure. And they sort of backed into it, right? Because now they have content teams. Not everybody's going to be Red Bull with their own sort of production and TV shows. But thought leadership, I don't want to give away secrets, but it's pretty easy on LinkedIn, right? Quality, consistency, and cadence will get you there. Rich media will get you there. Saying something provocative, yes, but on a regular cadence is as important. And then you sort of say, well, where else can I tell this story? And there's lots of places to do it. But if I was going back to sort of what everybody was talking about in terms of events, like the word I think about events is like, use it as the lever, right? The event itself, you know, if there's 10,000 people at MJ Biz, and let's just say there is this year, even though with all due respect to them, like I'd be shocked. For the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to say 15, right? 15,000. Sure. MJ Biz gets 15,000 people now. Sure. And you are a B2B company on the trade show floor. You spent a minimum 10 grand to be there, 10 grand to have your team there. It's a very expensive place to fly and stay and eat and get around, right? So say you're out 20 grand just to be there. Of those 10 or 15,000, you're a B2B customer. You're a B2B, like how many people you're actually trying to get in your cadence to sell to, right? Like 100, 200, 300. Great. Maybe you get there. Maybe on a trade show floor with 15,000 people, you find the right 300 to sell them. And then what? Then you got to do the follow-up, you got to do the cadence. But like, where are those people spending their time 362 days a year? Because everybody else is trying to sell them those 3 days too. Like I always think about strategists as sort of the premise of sort of Cultivated in a daily newsletter and sort of how we put out content and information and our editorial is like, where are the people spending the rest of the year? Because the rest of the year is when business gets done. Like there are people that go to MJ Biz and want to do business for sure. They go to all the events. They want to do those things. ICBC and maybe the European example is probably better because it's more in its infant stage, right? But like in a maturing market, like you need to be where they are the rest of the year because you don't know their sales cycle. You don't know when they're buying shit. Like being in front of them, even if you're there 362 days a year in front of them, when you get to the show, they're going to know who you are. You're not starting the conversation at 0. You're starting it at 10. And when we're talking to folks, advertisers, partners, like we say, look, you have a major event coming up in the first week in December. You ought to be spending resources, capital, time, and treasure now, September, October, November. So when you get to a meeting in December, the first week in December, maybe in Las Vegas, they know who you are. And maybe you even set the meeting because you've been like, you know, I wouldn't use it just to open a conversation the first week in December because you will never close the last 3 weeks in December. And then it's January. It's a new year. It's fucked. Like people sell things at MJ Biz. I get that. But like, if you're not pre-planning that, you are wasting at least $20,000 of you and your company's time and money. And like, you just have to build what Mike and Alex and everybody's saying is like, you really need to use it as a leverage point, not the actual thing you want to do.
Alex, although I think maybe he's tending to some domestic matters at the moment, but I did have a question for him. Maybe I can hop over to Michael really quick. What ways can events humanize cannabis brands and create more of a emotional connection maybe with their audiences, whoever their customers may be?
Thank you, David. Great question. And Jay, brilliant answers there. Well done. So I think, look, at the most basic level, face-to-face human interaction is still the quickest and most effective way to humanize a brand, build a rapport, and make long-lasting connections with different audiences. So it is so much easier to build a rapport and a relationship with someone when you're at an event face-to-face as opposed to video, phone call, or a digital interaction. So that's the first thing that I would say. The next thing I would say is leverage your people and storytelling. So it's not just about, events are not just about fancy branded booths or nicely packaged products. Events are extremely powerful because they put a face to your brand. At an event, your people are essentially your brand. So with that in mind, I think what I would say is, and this might sound a little harsh or it might be completely obvious, I don't know. Especially if you are exhibiting at an event, choose your people wisely. Choose the best possible sales and marketing people you've got. Choose the best communicators. Choose the least introverted. Choose those that are most passionate about the brand. And I don't think it's bad to say that you've got to be strategic about these things when you're spending a lot of marketing dollars or a lot of marketing pounds or a lot of marketing euros. Because these are the people that are going to humanize your brand. So they're going to bring it to life. They're going to tell you your brand story in hopefully an emotive and a passionate way. So they need to be top class communicators. They need to be emotionally intelligent. They need to be personable. Um, they need to look neat and tidy. You know, there's no point in having this lovely booth and great products if then you've got, you know, if you've got people on the stand that are kind of half dressed and things like that. So because every last little thing that your people say or do at an event will be reflected through and associated with your brand. So it's super, super critical to get it right. Um, I think the other thing I would say is create experiences to humanize your brand. So when people interact with your brand in a live setting at an event, you know, they can see it, they can touch it, they can taste it, whatever. It moves from being this like abstract concept to something that they actually have personally felt. It evokes emotion. So um, that's what creates emotional memory, and can make that connection with the brand. And I think the relationships and connections developed at the event due to that emotional experience, there's a higher degree of stickiness. That sticks long after the event is finished. Um, and then I think the final thing that I would mention is community and community building. So one of the most powerful ways to humanize a brand is to create a sense of belonging, a sense of community, which is something that events can probably do better than any digital interaction, for example, whether it's through roundtables, networking sessions, interactive experiences on your booth. What you're doing is you are showing your audience that they are part of your community. They're not just prospects, they're not just customers, they're not just a number. They are part of your community, they are part of your brand. Um, and look, people connect better and connect emotionally when they feel like they are being included. You know, when they feel like they're valued and part of something bigger, that creates a much deeper connection, I would say. And I think just to finish, sorry, I think the cannabis industry in general is obviously more so than any other industry that I've worked in to date. It's really built on strong community, you know, and even on the consumer side, it's a very, you know, I'm talking from a sort of B2B perspective but even on the consumer side, it's a similar story. It's a community, it's almost a movement. There's a rich culture there as well. So I think with that in mind, people that you meet at cannabis events are already open and well primed to become part of your community because it's at the core of the industry itself. And in doing so, when they become part of your community, they become part of your brand as well.
Good point.
Thanks, Michael. Alex, question for you might be one of our last ones for the panel today, but I wanted to get your perspective on what you've seen as sort of the evolution of cannabis events, not just in Canada and the US, also Europe. You've obviously seen this trajectory over the last decade plus. You've seen the Lift Expo rise and fall. We've seen MJ Biz kind of certainly pull back from a high watermark that it was at a few years ago. We are seeing larger events now in Europe, but I would imagine maybe there's a bit of a less of that wave than we saw in North America. I'm just curious your perspective, how companies should take into account the way events are changing and how to really maximize marketing dollars when they're choosing which events to attend.
Yeah, that's a good question. And really, there's a few different factors. I mean, you have to look at your own business is very important, and whether it's from like a B2B or a B2C component. But I hear all the time, there's so many events, but actually when you look a lot closer, there really isn't a lot of events. And maybe there was a lot of events and we've seen a lot of come and go, but the ones that have kind of stayed, and you kind of hear they build up momentum. And I think that's really important when you're choosing it. And going to these events is really important, but they take up a lot of money, but also they take up a lot of your time. When people say, oh, like I'll give you a deal or whatever, it's not about the deal, it's about the value. I've said to many event people, charge me 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, as long as you can show me the ROI that I get from it. It's no problem. It's not a matter of, oh, we'll let you do it for $5. Well, if I only get a little ROI, I can't do it because it really takes up bandwidth and things like that. So that's an important point, and something just to quickly touch on that Mike was talking about, and he mentioned a few times, the human element of it. Really, really important, and it can't be overstated. Really getting to know people as human beings and outside of work, and in this cannabis industry. And I like to kind of point out that maybe 40% of the people in this industry are not so honest and such good people. And that's actually good compared to where we started. It used to be a lot higher, but when you're doing international business, it's really important to kind of get to know these people because trust is so hard to earn. But after you've seen them year after year, you get to build up that trust and you get to know them as people. Oh, you have this and that in your family. And that's when you really start to build relationships. And as part of that, your reputation. I can't stress enough how important reputation is. People all talk internationally. It took a little bit longer, but now, people know, oh, you're a Canadian. Do you know Deepak? Do you know Alex Revich? They're going to ask me about them. Happens all the time. Hey, what do you know about this guy? And or how is she doing? And you know what? If these people are friends, then we're going to be honest. And that's why reputation is so, so important. And really one of the important reasons of why you go to these things is to build this rapport and to build this trust, especially when you're talking internationally. It makes it that much harder. So those are some of the reasons I think about it. And I know, Dave, you do a really cool event. I love checking out whenever I can. Growing Relationships is a really unique one. I read all the different obviously your StratCann, Cultivated. I read all the time Business of Cannabis. These are important places to learn about what events are going on and what's going on. No, no, Jay. This is where I find out what events and what people are talking about. And I share that on my LinkedIn network, and I run into people that I don't see for years, and they say, "Oh, they know everything about me." It's because they follow me on LinkedIn and they know my whole career. I don't even have to even catch them up. So these are some of the things that I think about, and when choosing the event, back to your point, it's really important to make it one that gives you the ROI and try it out and ask around and adjust as needed. But it's a 3-year strategy. It's not something you just do once and hope for the best. You have to have like a 3-year plan. And then at the end of the 3rd year, you can really evaluate how successful it's been.
I just like that Alex just compared himself to Deepak.
Well, I've actually been mistaken for him before, which is totally ridiculous. Yeah. It's oh, I liked your talk about I said, no, I don't think so. I figured out he was talking about oh, you're not Deepak. No, different brown guy.
All Canadians look alike.
Yeah, I guess so.
And, Alex, I think that's a really important point, and I think it kind of wraps up what everyone was talking about, especially in terms of events, is it's often not just about the event. It's about everything surrounding the event. And I think we hear that a lot with some of the big events that, people may go to the city, but not necessarily even get tickets to the event. It's about all the networking opportunities around there. And that's not me saying don't go to these events. It's me emphasizing the value of much more than just the trade show floor or just the event itself. It's about getting all of the same people in the same room, or at least in the same city, to have those networking conversations that really makes an event, takes an event over the top, I think.
That's a good point for sure.
Okay, well, I think that's the end of our panel, although I have to just give the award to Jay for continuing to have the most cultivated beard in the cannabis industry.
Right, I know it's a competition between you two.
Oh, we are the opposite sides of the spectrum there for sure.
Yes, we're the barber looks at us differently when we walk in for sure.
Yes. All right, well, guys, thank you very much for all of your insight, and I want to make sure we stay on schedule, so I'm going to pass things back over to Brooke, who will introduce the next panel.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
David,
guys.
Jay, Michael, Alex. That was so insightful, and I know a huge value to our audience. If you guys have any questions for our speakers, definitely reach out to them on LinkedIn. As a reminder, this also will be going up on Marigold's YouTube channel for people to rewatch, and to everyone who RSVP'd and couldn't make it today. But yeah, over to our last panel of the afternoon, Building a Sustainable Business Beyond Borders. Katie, over to you.
Thank you, Brooke. That was such a great panel. I took some notes that I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit here. I love this notion of like turning selling into storytelling. As a PR girl myself, that's definitely something that we've always leaned on, and how that really enables you to make that emotional connection and be memorable. Is of course going to events with whether it's 5,000 or 15,000 other people, figuring out how to stand out, of course, really important. I laughed at the, you don't do a press release every day comment, because if you guys were around at the beginning of legalization, that's exactly what it felt like. And actually really hurt kind of cannabis's relationship with media, just because it was starting to look like spam. Like every publicly traded company was putting out, I don't know, 5, 6 press releases a week. And so that's come around. That's changed for us as an industry, and media is certainly taking us a lot more seriously, which is really great. I also love the notion of like quality, consistency, and cadence from Jay. Really good thing to remember. If you're going to invest in anything, really having a before, during, and after strategy. It's industry agnostic, but sometimes we forget about that because we're moving so quickly, and we're going to a lot of things. And so how to kind of fit that all into your calendar. And then, I don't think this applies to any of our panelists or anyone we have on here today, but definitely showing up with the right people. Our industry is full of different kinds of people and different kinds of characters, but really making sure the people on the floor represent your brand and represent who you are. There's room for everyone, but not every brand applies to sort of every sort of personality type, and really making sure you're leaning into that. So thank you so much for that first panel. My name is Katie Pringle, the co-founder of Marigold PR. We've been in the space since 2016, so we have seen a lot, as have the rest of our panelists here today. We've spent a lot of time doing traditional PR relationship building across borders, for sure. I also liked what Jay said a lot about, like, you don't go out being like, I'm going to be a global company. But as you evolve into a global company, it's something we're going to talk a lot about in this panel. There's a lot to consider, and there's a lot to consider in terms of how you position yourself and how you put yourself out there. And even the sort of tools you're using for content or for public relations that do inform AI and do inform search and impact. Getting really organized on that is becoming extra important in terms of how all of our information is pulled. So what I'd like to do is throw to our panelists to introduce themselves. Sherry, we'll start with you.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Katie and the Marigold team for having me here. So I'm Sherry Boodram. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CannDelta, which is a regulatory and scientific cannabis consulting company. We primarily help with licensing, operational compliance, helping companies operationalize once they do have their license, SOP, technical writing, really everything in between from starting your company until your doors are open and beyond that. We work in Canada and globally as well. So you kind of, see us around. My background specifically, I am a chemist by training. I've worked in government for many years before starting CannDelta. I was first exposed to the cannabis industry back in 2005, actually, before formal industry was started. So I've seen many changes over the period of time. So happy to be here today.
Thanks, Sherry. Over to you, Barry.
Thanks. Hi, Katie. I'm Barry Laxer. I work with Cielo Verde in Montreal. We're a mid-sized cannabis cultivator. We have 2 facilities, one in the West Island of Montreal and one a little bit north of here, up in Lachute. We started out in 2021. We've been building ourselves kind of steadily and slowly as the years have gone on. We focus mostly in Quebec, but we do sell quite a bit in Ontario and out west, and now we're making a little bit of a reach into the Maritimes. We started getting into exports about a year and a half ago. We were late to the game, I guess. We started seeing other people doing it and figured we'd give it a try. We started our first exports into Israel, where we're still selling, and we've expanded into a few of the other countries as well. Learning as we go along, as we do still in Canada. We have a good sized team, probably 60 or 65 people with us now. Most of them have been with us for quite a while. What else can I tell you? I've been in cannabis since 2018, really, since the beginning. I started before this company. Excuse me. I started with a company called Cannera, who a lot of you are probably familiar with. I joined them right after they did their first capital raise, and I helped them build up their facility in Farnham, and helped them for about a year to get going. And after that, I left there, and as fate would have it, Aurora was offloading some of their facilities, and I was just in the right place at the right time and was able to put the deal together, and that's how we got into here. And prior to that, I've had a very different career, nothing to do with cannabis, but a lot to do with manufacturing and international trading. And I think maybe that's given me some of the skill that I'm able to draw on as we're expanding into other places, different ways of working and different types of people. And I'm glad to share that a little bit later on. Thank you.
Thank you. Deepak, over to you.
Thanks for having me, Katie, and thanks for putting together this webinar. Deepak Anand here. I'm a consultant in the space. I work with companies predominantly that are cannabis companies looking to scale into international markets. So companies in places like Canada, Colombia, Thailand, they may be interested in getting into markets like Germany, Poland, UK, Australia, etc. So I help them scale into those markets. And then the second vertical to my business is really helping CPG companies, whether it be tobacco, alcohol, pharma, looking at the sector and really just understanding how they should get around the sector. And if they're interested in jumping in, just actually helping them with day-to-day strategies and where and what they should be looking at targeting. So thanks for having me and glad to be here.
Thank you. So we'll dive into it. We've got quite a few questions here today. If you do have any questions, I'll try to watch the chat. There's also a Q&A function that you can throw them in. And also you can find all of our panelists on LinkedIn. It's probably a really great way to get in touch. So our first question here is for Sherry. So how can cannabis companies ensure that compliance isn't just a box to check, but a foundational part of building the business and building the brand?
Yeah, well, as we know, we've been in the Canadian cannabis industry for a while now, and it's very clear now that compliance is a core pillar. You can't get away from it. So when thinking about expanding to other markets where there naturally are going to be different rules, different regulations, and therefore additional and different compliance expectations, it's really critical to build that layer into your company's strategic expansion plans, right? So thinking about and understanding that there's going to be multi-level compliance. So it's not just adhering to, what's in Canada, thinking about how is your compliance strategy and your compliance framework now in your business shifting to integrate the compliance level and the compliance needs of the jurisdiction that you're looking to expand to. So compliance is not just an afterthought or a quick action. It really does take time and really thought and planning to really strategize and how it's going to be woven into your business. So in highly regulated sectors like cannabis, your license and ability to remain operational depends entirely on how much the regulators trust you. If compliance is treated as a last minute checkbox, you put both your license and your brand equity at risk. So again, it has to be part of the DNA of your organization, and compliance becomes a competitive advantage that opens doors to global markets for your company. So in practice, that really starts with embedding the compliance across all functions of the business. So it's not just in the quality departments where a lot of people kind of, just like to focus. Everyone from operations to marketing to supply chain should understand how their work touches the regulatory obligations of that jurisdiction. So for example, if you have a marketing team expanding into Europe, they must understand the restrictions on promotional language, patient claims, just as much as the manufacturing team needs to understand the GMP level batch release requirements, for example. And then if you're thinking about from the perspective of the systems that are in place, that means, designing SOPs, the governance frameworks, QMS systems or quality management systems that align with that jurisdictional best practices. So, everything has to kind of work very seamlessly and thoughtfully so that the systems can be scalable and adaptable for long-term success. Another layer to think about is proactive risk management, because compliance is not something that's static. You can't be complacent or too comfortable as a business, especially in the landscape that we're in, where regulations evolve, interpretations shift, and the enforcement priorities change. Right, we were seeing what's happening in Portugal, and now it's kind of set a wave in other markets where countries are becoming more strict in what they're importing, right? So things are always changing. You always have to be, adaptable and flexible in how you're considering your operations. So companies that build continuous monitoring and risk assessment in their compliance culture can really pivot faster whenever there is a shift. And one thing I just want to mention as well, that was kind of touched on a little bit in the first panel, is about how difficult it is really having a global brand sometimes. So just thinking about being flexible to the fact that there may be changes to your original intended brand to suit the market needs that you're entering to. We had a client that we're working with that is going into GMP. We're supporting them on the GMP side, and their GMP compliance, and they are a recreational cannabis company. But because of the challenges that the Canadian market is facing, they want to expand internationally. And internationally, as we know, it's a medical market. So their brand identity and everything that they've worked for, creating that recreational brand, they have to kind of reshift their portfolio and thinking about how they're going to adjust to, meet the needs of the consumer preferences in the medical markets.
Do you find clients are surprised at the additional layers that they need to consider? Are they heartbroken when you tell them they have to?
I think they know it, but I think it's hard to come to terms with the reality of that, right? Because it's a lot of work, usually more work than they think, and could be more, resource cost intensive than they had planned for, and takes longer.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get their minds wrapped around it. Oftentimes what we do, we'll come in and do a gap assessment so they could clearly see where there are deficiencies and have a clear path forward, and we'll work with them on what do you need to do to get to that stage where you can enter that market and go through that certification process, and how do we prioritize that and work within your budget to do that? Do you need help doing that? Do you need us to take over all of that heavy lifting, or do you have a team that is equipped to do that? So there are a lot of considerations, and I think it's hard for companies to really map out what that plan looks like without having, the additional resources, sometimes additional support.
Without having a Sherry to tell them. Sherry.
Well, I can help. There are others, but yes.
Awesome. Over to you, Barry. So drawing from your experience scaling in European markets, what qualities have you found most essential in choosing partners? Like, we know that's such a key important play as you grow and expand. But what have you found to be the most essential in terms of finding those that are going to be good, or hopefully going to be good for long-term growth?
Good question. Because when you're starting in new countries with new people, you don't really know who they are. Sometimes you have a little bit of reputation. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes in every country, there's 2 or 3 players that you hear about, that you know about, and you tend to gravitate towards them because it's something that you know. But really, when you're looking for any international partner, particularly in another country, in another jurisdiction, the most important thing that you really want to know is how viable they are, how financially viable they are. You always have to remember that in Canada, for as much as we like it and don't like it, and all the ups and downs, we're always dealing with governments. And whether you like the way they operate or don't, or whatever your feeling is, you know that you're going to get paid. And one thing that I think a lot of people don't always consider about the export market is that you have to have partners that are financially strong, that are able to conduct the business that they say they're going to. and to do what they say. You need partners that don't start asking by, how much credit you're gonna give them, or what kind of terms you're gonna give them. I have to say that from our point of view, from a business point of view, that's the most important. You want partners that are experienced also, because cannabis, in particular, there's all kinds of liabilities and pitfalls in terms of quality, consistency, delivery, and you need partners that have been around for a while, that are aware of the ups and downs and things that can happen along the way. That's, I think, our biggest concern. Lots of people come to us with inquiries for product, whether they contact us, via email or people that we meet at shows. I do find that in other countries, there's a lot of pretense. A lot of people present themselves as things that they're not, and drag you into spending a lot of attention and energy on things that won't come to fruition. And you have to be able to kind of see the forest through the trees like that. Those are, I think, the big things. And look at what kind of operations they are, and are they, we may be scalable, but are they, who are their customers? How do they do business? Those are my primary things when we're looking at new partners in new countries.
Yeah, thank you. And for some of the smaller LPs, we know like that's their entire crop. That export is their entire business, and so you're right. Like you don't want anything to go wrong with that. Like,
well, there's so many things that can go wrong, but primarily two things really. When the product leaves from here, it's not, like I said, it's not going to Quebec or Ontario or Alberta. It's going far away. It's being handled by people that you don't know. It's going to be reevaluated wherever it's going, and you always have to remember that it might leave your shipping doors pristine, but after that, it's out of your control. And I think particularly for smaller LPs, where it always looks like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, someone's going to come in and buy 200 kilos of a product for $3, and you see $500,000 plus, and everything looks wonderful until it isn't. Until something doesn't test right, or your THC that you declare doesn't come out to be the same thing somewhere else, or it's not checking out the way that you assured that it would. All kinds of things can happen. And particularly for smaller LPs that I think put a lot of eggs into single baskets, there's a lot of pitfalls. People sort of see the upside, but as we've seen since we've gotten into it, it always comes from the things that you don't expect. And I think you have to be very wary of the things that you take for granted here that aren't necessarily the same possibilities in markets where you're not dealing with government, where you're dealing with private companies, private people, different agendas, and you have to be well prepared for it. It's always great to be prepared for everything that's going to work and see, how terrific it's going to be, but you always have to be factoring for when it doesn't work. How prepared are you?
Thank you. Deepak, over to you. So you've worked extensively in so many different markets, including Germany, the UK, Australia. Can you talk about how businesses balance the tension between growing a global brand, but then also adapting? Sort of some of the things that Sherry was speaking to, and thinking about that compliance framework across different borders.
Yeah, and Katie, I guess before I answer that question, I'll just take it back to, some of the things that Sherry and Barry both were outlining. I think that in the cannabis industry, at least in Canada, there seems to, or even globally now, there seems to be this notion that the international markets are the savior, that's where a lot of the opportunities are. And whilst that is true to a large extent, those markets come with their own challenges. I think Barry was outlining some of them, Sherry was outlining some others. It's important to work with companies and partners that are aware of sort of some of the pitfalls and also can provide solutions. I think Barry was speaking a bit about the financial challenges, because once product leaves Canada, it cannot actually be brought back, even if someone wants to quote unquote return it. There's no concept of it coming back. On the flip side, Export Development Canada actually has a great program to be able to hedge against receivables. So, they cover up to 90% for a 1% fee. So there are ways to be able to hedge against, non-receivables, non-payables, those sorts of things. And it's very important to keep in mind, working with companies, with people, with partners that have that knowledge and have done that before. To answer your question around quality, I think that in Canada, typically products are known for quality based on potency, based on appeal, and how new something might be, whether it be casual pre-rolls as an example, or whether it be live resin gummies or shatter, and that's sort of the benchmark of quality. Internationally, the benchmark of quality is how can you consistently hit a 30% THC month over month on a European pharmacopoeia testing spec, right? That's the definition of quality. So it's a very different measure and a very different lens through which the international markets gauge and assess quality. As far as price, there still are a number of opportunities on the international market. There are still some markets such as Poland, the UK, that are paying a pretty high price per gram. But other markets are in their saturation phase. Germany certainly has a lot of product currently in the market. There are a number of challenges. I think Sherry alluded to Portugal as being one of them. There's a number of other challenges on a compliance and logistical standpoint that companies are still dealing with. So I think it's very important to be able to understand what you're getting into and be prepared for that. And if you're not prepared, align yourself and partner with people and companies that you can trust and that have done this before and that can really hold your hand and guide you through it, right? Because the quality compliance aspect, the partnership aspect, they're all very, very important ones that could make or break your business.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Actually, a question for all of you. What is your, and this is not in our discussion guide, what is your experience been like with the Canadian reputation? Like, what would you say the Canadians kind of, where do we stand globally in terms of a reputation for quality, for, we know we're leaders in the space, but what does that look like globally, Deepak?
Maybe I'll kick it off for sure. So I think, Canada, if you're talking about quality, compliance, and volume of product, right? I think those are the key metrics, right? I think it's one thing to be able to get a really good quality batch and then not get it for several months. I think Canada leads the world. And, we're competing with Thailand, we're competing with, South Africa, we're competing with Colombia, and we can compete on price, but we are competing on quality. So I think the global phenomenon, if you will, from a purchasing perspective is if you want high quality cannabis products, if you want the volume that you're going to be dependent on consistently month over month, you're coming to Canada. So I think we've got a great reputation. I think we often overlook some of the things that our regulatory regime has set up. But one of the things that it has set up is the ability to comply internationally with with countries and with requirements that come up. And you're seeing various U-turns. You look at Thailand. There's a bunch of U-turns that are happening on their regulations. So I think the one thing that we do have is a really good reputation. I think our cultivators have now finally done a good job, setting up their businesses for success and setting up good products that meet compliance. And so I think that is something that Canada is definitely known for.
Yeah, thank you. And what have you heard, Barry? What's your experience been like with the Canadian reputation?
It's a good question. I've sort of heard both ends of the spectrum. You have to remember that when Canada started exporting, I guess Australia was one of the big countries, and they expanded into Europe. The leaders were the big public companies, Canopy, Aurora, Tilray, Hexo, and they weren't stellar. There was a lot of quality variation. There was a lot of good and bad, on time and not on time. I think to a large extent because by the time they started exporting, a lot of them weren't producing themselves. They were, buying a lot from other LPs, and consistency was a really big issue. One of the first conferences that I went to, I don't remember who was speaking, but he actually spoke to the point of, how junky Canadian product was, because you never knew where it was coming from, and you never knew from one shipment to the next what you were getting.
Hmm.
Since then, as smaller players have gotten in and have more access to foreign markets, it can have the opposite sort of reputation. There are a lot of terrific craft producers that are represented sometimes by bigger packagers or bigger players, and they get to get their products into markets that they might not otherwise, and a lot of sort of mid-sized companies that can consistently deliver the same product shipment after shipment. So to that extent, we do have a very, prominent and stellar reputation in a lot of places. And Canada is the benchmark for some of the best product in the world. That's for sure. But it sort of goes both ways. It depends if your experience has been with the smaller, craftier guys or the larger, more mainstream type of companies.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And consistency remains sort of a challenge across the board. Sherry, what are your feelings on that? You're in the US all the time, so you have
the US, they don't care about what Canadian cannabis is. They're nationalists. But I guess like outside of the US, the US, yes, like if they have the opportunity to, engage with external markets, I'm sure that they would love to experience Canadian cannabis, right? And have an opinion on it, but they're just not in that position to do that. But they do recognize that Canada has a lot of know-how, right? Like, so us coming in as a consultant, it's like, okay, you've worked in Canada, you've been in the market for so long, you've seen so much, show us your ways, right? But I guess in terms of the international markets outside of the US, I do agree with Deepak that there is a level of like reputation and a history of trust that Canada has developed over the years. So that has worked very well for Canadian companies. And what Barry is saying is also true, in that the first companies that started entering these markets, it was not great. But that kind of makes sense with the framework that we have in Canada. When Health Canada developed the quality standards, it was under GPP, right? And we're always, and me being in the government at the time, we're always like, how does this going to work like in international markets? But it wasn't really a concern, because the thought was that, cannabis was really going to stay largely in Canada. So any exports would be very minor. But, companies that were working to exporting, it kind of had to be the bigger companies that had the capital to do that and experiment, because the smaller companies just couldn't do it. They couldn't waste that time and the resources and the cannabis. And if they're going to export it and the stability fails and it has to get shipped back or degrades or the testing is bad, they really just couldn't afford that. So the bigger players did take that fall for everyone else. And I think now it's a little bit more optimized. We have a lot more data and experiences on how to export cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's worked, very well now for the smaller players that could, take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Deepak, you had something to add.
Yeah, can I just add a point on the US? Just with my travels, I think what I am starting to see, though, is now US brands, whether it be Sluggers, whether it be Golden State Banana, Jeters, etc., they're all looking, to follow the Wanas and the early kind of guys that went international. So we are now starting to see some US brands start to make their way into Europe. Mike Tyson is quite popular with his brand in the international markets. But what we are also seeing is companies, and I think it's only a matter of time before US MSOs start paying serious attention. If you look at Curaleaf, I think they're the classical example of a company that has been US based, that when they look at their growth and their expansion, it's not coming from the US. You're only going to have a finite number of US markets coming online, whereas internationally, you've got so many more markets coming on, right? So I think you will start to see US companies start to take advantage of the international markets. I don't think it'll be the same way that the Canadian companies have done it, which is grow the product necessarily in the US and then start to ship it, but mirror sort of a Curaleaf strategy, right? And I think if you look at Curaleaf International, they're doing a great job, right? Between their combo of NGC in Canada, as well as their cultivation in Portugal, and then all their assets on the ground in places like UK and Poland. I think that's where you will start to see more and more US MSOs start to pay attention. So there is still that US angle. It's quite different from the traditional exporting a movement of product, if you will.
Yeah, I agree with Deepak.
Yeah, and I guess, a question I have is like, where do you, and actually we'll make this the last question and see if there's any Q&A in the chat, but where do you see brands going? Like as more countries come on, as the price of cannabis, globally changes, where do you see the value of that, of building those international brands? Like it's funny, Deepak, you mentioned sluggers. Like it's neat to see some brands even investing in Canada, which kind of slowed for a little while, and so it's nice to see that. But where do you see that going at an international level, like the brand itself perspective? Barry, we could start with you.
Sure. There's two sides to it, really. We have a brand here in Canada, a second one that we're working on. And the people that we work with in other countries are starting to know it, and there's starting to be some interest in it. But a lot of our partners in these other countries are also brands themselves. So from our point of view, we have to be careful about how much we want to elevate our own brand and try and drive it to top of mind in the countries where we're working, because we also don't want to be competitors with our partners. And it's a real consideration for us, because in those countries, the larger importers are their own brands and their own marketing companies. So we have to be sensitive as to what they are. I do think that the companies that have the ability to promote themselves are going to start, but you also have to remember that in most of the European countries, similar to Canada, there are limitations on how much they can promote and how much they can market themselves, because most of them have the same kind of regulatory as we do, where marketing and creating a brand is challenging. The States is able to do it because they have no restrictions, and they can kind of through the back door promote their brands in those countries, but it is a challenge, and it is sort of a little bit of a slippery slope, like it is here in Canada. So I think that because Canada does have the reputation of being a good producer, we can promote brands from here, focusing on sort of our reputation of quality. But I think it's something that we haven't wrapped our heads around yet. We do have requests from a couple of our partners in other countries to license our brand and to market under our brand, but there's a real risk there, and I could actually speak about it for a second. One thing that brands do have to be very aware of is that your brands are your brands wherever they're registered. And if you do have a brand, make sure that brand is registered in the country before you start to promote it, because otherwise, your brand is fair game to anybody else that likes it, and it's still open game.
That's some good advice. Sherry, what are your thoughts on brands, Canadian brands building globally?
Yeah, I'm just using an example so we have a client in Canada that has actually expanded his brand to the New York market. In New York, there is a license type that's called Type 3 processor license, but it's essentially a brand license where your brand could come into the New York market. You don't have to be a resident of New York, and you will essentially find a co-manufacturer to produce your product, but it'll be your brand. It'll have your brand on the product itself, and then it could circulate within the New York market. And we do have a Canadian client who has successfully done that and currently has their brand on shelves in New York. So is possible to do. And I think in that relationship, what was important when we were trying to, facilitate the commercialization of that product was finding a partner that really shared their values. And I think that actually was harder to find than you would imagine. And finding a good match and a good partner to be able to carry forward that brand. So, I mean, there's, like Barry said, it is difficult for sure. It is difficult, but I think that having a clear brand strategy and values that are backed by that the brand backs is an important perspective when considering how to move your brand into a different market.
Thank you. Yeah. Deepak, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I'll approach this a bit differently, Katie. I think if you're a big cannabis company, and there are a couple that are doing now a great job, I think initially there was some big companies that had a number of challenges, but I look at Aurora as one company. I look at Village Farms as another company that are big cannabis cultivators in Canada that are doing a great job internationally. And I think for them the challenge is, do you start to partner up and create, to Barry's point, someone else's brand? Because for lack of a better term, a lot of these importers are nothing more than middlemen, right? They're importing your product and then they're basically marketing and selling it. So if you're a big licensed producer, you need to start really looking back and saying, well, am I going to now start to put the Pure Sun Farms name or start to put the Aurora Cannabis name behind my product and really get that internationally? Or am I now going to start to build up someone else's brand that had no following and whose engine I'm driving completely? Is that going to be the right option for me, right? So I think it really depends on the size and scale. Having said that, there are smaller companies, All Nations comes to mind. They've done a phenomenal job in the UK with their brands and their products. So I think it really depends on company size and what your overall, vision is. But there certainly is a time and place for some companies to have their own brands in international markets and others to just partner up and really white label, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, thank you. We do have a question from the Q&A here. So the question is, what evidence do you have of meaningful brand loyalty in cannabis markets outside of North America? Please distinguish this from product loyalty. If evidence of brand loyalty is minimal, what justifies caring about brand loyalty in these markets? Does anyone want to take this one?
I can take one of them. So, I'll give an anecdotal example. Pure Sun Farms has a Pink Kush product that's been staple in the Canadian industry for a very long time. It's also a brand that has been staple now on the international market, right? Germany has had this product for over 3+ years, and that Pink Kush, it's not a new strain. It's not super high THC. It's just a strain that has stuck, and consumers, whether it be in Canada for the price point, or whether it be in Germany because it's selling really well in Canada, that is a brand that seems to stick internationally. So Pink Kush, Pure Sun Farms is just known for its quality and potency in certain markets. So I think that's one example, Katie, of a brand that is sticking continually on both sides.
Yeah, thank you. And would you argue that we're still kind of early days on brand building? We need some roadway and some time. Yeah.
Very much.
Very early.
Yeah.
Very early.
Because it's so new in those countries. The interesting thing about I find UK in particular, most people don't even know that cannabis is legal. If you stop 10 people on the street, nine of them, or 9.5 of them, or all of them, will have no idea that they can purchase legal cannabis. So to that end, brands are way in the background, I think, right now of people's consciousness, top of mind, because it's so new. I think, and the people that are selling them locally, the distributors, are pushing more their own name than their brands. They're sort of turning their name into a brand, and they're trying to build customer loyalty based on who they are, and less so about the actual sort of catalog of products that they're representing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sherry, are you a similar thing?
Yeah, if I do agree with what Barry's saying about the owner or having more of a brand identity, you being the brand. I think that we're seeing a lot of that as a way to get around, some of the ways to promote, products and to promote brands, and creating content around that. I think, I'm seeing a lot of that in the market. So I think that's, sort of the direction that we're going to from now. But again, things are still like super early.
Yeah, and will change 16 times in the next little
That's
while.
the only thing that's for sure.
That's the only thing that's for sure.
Change is constant and consistent in cannabis. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for this awesome conversation. Like I said at the beginning, I think you can find all of our panelists on LinkedIn, which is probably a great way to get in touch. The first panel was awesome. Really appreciated all you guys sharing insights on the event space, and to the three of you here. Thank you for all of your insights. We probably could have chatted for like another hour about this. There's so much to go through. But yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. We did our best to end almost on time. And Brooke, anything I missed before we head off?
That's all. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. Like I said, the recording will be sent out over email. It's also going to be on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
Thanks, Brooke. Thanks, Katie.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.